When I began to write, I thought nobody's written a film or made stories with immigrant characters in them before, really. And immigration was, my father was an immigrant, I came from that background and so on, and nobody had done it. And I guess that's the link with A Hard Day's Night, that there's something about the cinema, that's something so fresh and new, and it's such a charge when we went to see A Hard Day's Night in the Gaumont in Bromley High Street. And I remember going with all my mates.
Was that when it actually came out the first time, yeah?
64, 65.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen my mum scream before. And I remember all the mothers, and we were shocked, me and my mates, because all the mothers just, and screamed. And it was horrifying to see what we consider to be elderly people, obviously people in their 30s, behaving like that, and the sense of excitement and exhilaration. You knew that day that the devil had finally come to Bromley, and I fell in love with that devil music from that moment, and still love it to this day.
And I was watching it in Acton myself, I think, and I remember similar, but I don't remember the mother screaming. That's quite remarkable.
Yes, I can't imagine when anybody's mother would want to scream at the sight of Ringo Starr myself. But there you go.
But do you remember? I mean, obviously, we could talk a little bit about how the way in which music is often embedded in a lot of your work and in your work process. I mean, would you like to just talk a little bit about that first?
Well, music was the only art we had in Bromley. You had the television, and then there was music, the radio and records that you got from Alan Freeman had a record shop. Remember Alan Freeman had a shop in Bromley High Street? Used to go up to see Fluff Freeman. He was a very friendly man. That was the only culture you had. It was very difficult to see, French or European films or to get interesting books. But we had music, and that was our culture. And many of my friends from school then, became punks and were in bands and became photographers and so on, and found a way out of the suburbs through art and through culture. But
so were you a member of the Bromley contingent?
Yeah, they were my mates, and they still are. Yeah.
That was, for those who don't know, that was one of the founding groups of punk. A large number of them.
Well, the Sex Pistols came to play at the art college. It was like the Pope coming to Warsaw for us. And we went and started hanging around in the King's Road, around the road back, as we were just talking about, and around Malcolm McLaren's shop that was then, I think, called Sex. I think it was also called Let It Rock.
Let It Rock first, then Sex.
Yeah. And that's how we got involved in basically wearing rubber trousers.
And winding back to that first screening, what were the most memorable parts of the film for you? What were the things that really stick in your mind?
Well, it's odd now thinking about the film, because actually the film there's this incredible music, this exuberance, these kids, they're so cool, they look so beautiful, their clothes, the suits, they look fantastic. On the other hand, you realize that they are completely trapped. That they have sold their souls to the devil, that they are going to be in a train, in a room, in an aeroplane, on stage forever. They've entered some sort of hell, mostly, that seems to me mostly to be run by people like Wilfred Bramble, oddly enough. So the film has this exhilaration and this freedom about it, but actually it has an underside, which is that they're in a system, that they actually can't get out of until actually the Beatles later on stopped touring, decided not to carry on in that way.
But are the Beatles something that you still play a lot, or you feel a connection to in terms of their music, or is it something that you just have so firmly in your mind that you can just have it come to you when you feel like it?
Well, as you get older, it seems more and more amazing that those young people could write songs that are so, and still are so, exquisite. I mean, I remember we used to play the Beatles at school, and the music teacher was convinced that the songs were written by George Martin and Brian Epstein, and that John Lennon and Paul McCartney didn't actually write the songs. And I remember being, and I'm still outraged by this idea, that the teacher said that these boys, they weren't intelligent enough or talented enough to have written songs that were so beautiful. And yeah, the snobbery and the idea that, you know, it was as though he was saying to us, you know, you'll never do anything.
And is there something about the style of the film, as well as, you know, its kind of content that appeals to you or appealed to you?
Well, it's shot actually, it looks like 2012, doesn't it? It looks like The Office. I mean, it's a documentary or what they call a mockumentary. It's shot in you know, with wiggly cameras and, you know, fast cutting, and there's music and so on. So it does still look, it looks fantastic. It's a very modern, contemporary looking film even today. It's fantastic fun to watch, and that wonderful scene when they play "If I Fell" is so fantastic.
And what do you feel about the writing in it? You know, because it was written by Alan Owen and then probably rewritten by Dick Lester, and the Beatles probably improvised a bit of it. How does it come across to you?
Well, it's got a very good structure. You know, they're going to do this gig, and that's all there is, and they're just stuck in this train and backstage and so on. I mean, it's thin. There isn't much what you would call writing, and the film is just held together by the charisma of those kids. And looking at it now, you know, you look at it a different way. How beautiful they are, how fantastic they look. And that scene with George Harrison when he does his hair, it's fantastic.
And that use of the word grotty, which
is that right? Do you remember that?
Introduced to me in that film.
Is that
That's
right?
very grotty, that suit, you know, which I'd never heard that word before.
What the Beatles have done for the English language.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I know one of the things that's well known about you is that you play music all the time you write, which is something I can't do. It's like I need silence when I'm writing. And do you want to just sort of describe that kind of interaction?
Well, I'm terrified of silence. When it's silent, I think I'm going to die. And that, you know, no one is speaking to me and will never speak to me again. And I, being a writer, spend a lot of time sitting, you know, on my own. And I just listen to everything, all day. I listen to music when I'm working, and my kids play music for me, most of which actually is very, very unpleasant music to me. Grime and hip-hop and stuff, which I'm sorry, yeah. But I listen to a lot of Coltrane, a lot of jazz, and Miles Davis, and I was listening to the Alabama Shakes today. Someone said to me, "Well, you play the Rolling Stones?" I said, "Yeah, well, you'd think so, wouldn't you?"
And the way in which you know, I'm just sort of curious about this. You know, the way in which music is always a part of your literature, and the trick of pulling off how you bring music into the literature, which I suppose is that kind of reliant on the fact that everybody's heard the stuff you're writing about or can hear the stuff you're writing about when you do it.
Well, I was thinking today about Plato's view of artists and how much he hated the artists, and then I was thinking about quite a lot about recently, obviously, about fundamentalism. And then a few weeks ago, I was in Karachi in Pakistan, and one of my cousins there teaches English, and she teaches post-colonial studies. But she teaches the whole thing, but she's not allowed to teach Rushdie. And not only that, she says, you're not allowed to say his name. And she went into a store in Karachi and asked for Midnight's Children, and the guy said, you're not allowed to say that in here, you can't come in here, the shop will be burned down, you've got to fuck off straight away, it's so dangerous. And it made me think that, you know, how dangerous art is and how shocking the Beatles were, how shocking the Stones were, how shocking Jimi Hendrix is. And this is not only to do with fundamentalism, but, you know, there's something about music and about art when it works well that's really shocking, and people immediately want to stop it. I was thinking about John Lennon's remark about, you know, we're more popular than Jesus, and all those scenes on television, people burning Rubber Soul and so on. So there has to be something about good art that has to frighten and shock someone somewhere. Yeah, and that's what it's. Yeah.
It's still pretty phenomenal, isn't it, to think back to Beatlemania and how it kind of swept the country. I can still remember it. I was, a child, but it was just astonishing how it completely swept the country and changed so many things, or seemingly changed so many things.
Well, it made young people want to be in bands, I think, and it made young people believe they could be creative. I mean, if the 60s had any point, it was the belief that you yourself could do something that you weren't a nobody from nowhere, that you could be in a band, you could be a photographer, you could be a clothes designer, and whatever. And it's that sense of identification, I think, that one got from the Beatles and Stones that's so stimulating.
And could you imagine the Beatles ever featuring in anything you wrote yourself?
What do you mean?
I don't know, in some way. Do you imagine anything such as writing something in which they featured as characters, I mean?
I don't think you'd want Ringo Starr in anything you'd written, I really. No, I don't, really. But I wanted to write about music, and I wanted to write about race, I wanted to write about immigration, I wanted to write about racism, I wanted to write about the NF and the BNP in the 70s and 80s. And I guess in My Beautiful Laundrette and later on with The Buddha of Suburbia, it was finding some way. We were talking about Jean-Claude Carrier earlier and about writing tips, and I was thinking, what could you say to somebody who was a young writer that would help them in any way? And I thought, I don't know if you could, because each time you try and write something, it's a struggle to integrate all the things that interest you in one story. And I just mentioned what at that time really interested me, and I thought, well, how do you get all that into the same story? I mean, and there isn't anything anybody could say apart from the fact, well, it's a good idea that you try and do this, to merge all your interests into a form that is then interesting for other people. But I think, I guess the lesson of the Beatles in the cinema really is that the art, most of the significant art of the 20th century was commercial art, actually. That the Beatles were the greatest band, but they were a popular band. This wasn't obscure, difficult, modernistic work. This was stuff that, that your mum listened to, that was on the radio, that everybody liked. And I guess that's one of the things that I might say to my students when I'm teaching, that in fact the best art obviously moves the form forward, but also it appeals to an audience, and we're watching this film that was made in 1964 today, and it still works and gives pleasure. So you could say at least that's what one of the things that an artist is supposed to be doing, is really engaging with an audience and pushing the form.